Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a story that feels older than the stars themselves, the rise and ruin of the Titans. This isn't just another bedtime story, it's the raw beginning of Greek mythology, when the sky and earth were at war, when gods were still children, and when every whisper of fate felt like thunder in the dark. Imagine yourself drifting back into that silence before creation, where the only sound is your own breath, steady and small against the weight of eternity. Out of that silence came Gaia, the earth herself, and Uranus, the endless sky, a union that should have brought peace, but instead sparked the most dysfunctional family drama history has ever known. These aren't the polished marble gods you see in museums. The Titans were massive, brutal, and flawed. They didn't rule from temples, they ruled from fear, from hunger, from the aching desire to hold on to power no matter the cost. And as you settle in, think about why these stories lasted, not because they were perfect myths, but because they carried the same shadows we wrestle with today. Fear of being replaced, the urge to control what we love, the hope that something better waits on the other side of chaos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The silence stretches, endless and heavy, until it almost feels like it might swallow you whole. Out of that stillness, something stirs, not a sound, not a flash of light, just the faintest tremor, as if the void itself is taking a breath. From that breath, Gaia comes into being. She isn't born with a cry or a scream, she simply is, vast and steady. She is the earth beneath all things, the quiet strength that everything else will one day cling to. Her body is the mountains not yet raised, the rivers not yet carved, the soil not yet seeded. She doesn't ask to exist. She just becomes the ground you could stand on if there were anyone here to stand at all. Then, arching above her, comes Uranus the sky, cold, endless, glittering with the promise of stars. He stretches himself across her, not as a partner, not as an equal, but as a weight pressing down. At first, there is beauty in the union earth and sky locked together, a vast canopy above and a steady foundation below. But beauty curdles quickly when it traps instead of nurtures. Together, Gaia and Uranus give birth. First come the Titans, 12 colossal beings, half law and half chaos, built to shape the world. They are not gentle children. Oceanus, a god of rivers and seas, coils himself around the edges of the earth, encircling everything like a great moat. Hyperion, blazing with the light of the sun, already looks down with the arrogance of daylight. Themis embodies law and order, her presence sharp and unyielding. Mnemosyne carries memory, each glance like a weight of all that was and all that will be. These are not simple offspring, they are the architecture of existence. But Uranus looks at them with fear. They are too loud, too large, too alive. To him, they are not heirs but threats. And so, in the silence of Gaia's womb, he pushes them back inside her, one by one. Imagine the earth itself swollen, aching with children forced into the dark, their cries muffled under layers of soil. Gaia becomes less mother and more prison. Her body bends with their weight, her heart cracks with their anger. She endures, but endurance is not the same as peace. From this torment rise others, stranger still. The Cyclopes one-eyed, blazing with the spark of creation-born inventors, but dismissed as dangerous. Then the Hecatonchires are the 100-handed ones, towering forces of chaos with 50 heads each. To Uranus, they are monstrosities, proof that creation has gone too far. He drives them deep into Gaia, burying them alive inside their mother. Gaia groans beneath the burden. Every mountain you can imagine pressing against her skin is a titan trapped inside. Every tremor in the earth a hand clawing upward. Every whisper of wind a muffled cry for release. She is suffocating under the very children she gave life to, and the silence of the void is no longer peaceful. It's unbearable. She begins to plan. Out of stone, she shapes a weapon, a sickle, sharp enough to rend the heavens themselves, but she cannot wield it. It must be one of her children, someone who dares to strike against the sky. She calls them forth in whispers, promises of freedom in the darkness. One by one, they recoil. They may hate Uranus, but they fear him more. None will raise their hand except the youngest. Cronus, Cronus, the clever one, the patient one, the son who has lived his entire existence knowing he is trapped under both father and mother. He takes the sickle in silence, his eyes hard with something colder than rage resolve. In that moment, the story of the Titans begins not as a tale of glory, but as a family wound too deep to heal. And the sky, oblivious to the trap, still presses down on the earth, unaware that his reign will soon end in blood. He waits in the dark beneath his mother's skin, fingers tight on the stone blade she shaped. The sickle is cool, then warm, as if the rock remembers the pressure that forged it. Around him, his siblings press and ache. Mountains unborn, pushing from the inside. No one speaks. The pressure says everything, let it end. Cronus is the youngest, and he knows what that means last to be imagined, last to be feared. He learned that patience can be a leash if you never bite through it. He learned that waiting, if you are clever, becomes planning. Gaia's whisper threads through the dark. Not command, not plea something older, like wind through roots. Not for cruelty, she says, for breath. The sentence settles in him like a law. The blade is not just a weapon, it is a key. The lock is his father's body across the sky. He studies where the sky touches the earth, the fault lines of a marriage that stopped being tender long ago. When Uranus leans down, night after night, he does not cradle, he pins, he claims by weight. Cronus times the rhythm the way sailors will someday read tides, waiting for the moment the sky forgets to guard its throat. Fear passes through him and sharpens instead of dulling. He is not the strongest, not the brightest, not the most adored. He is the one who listens to stone grinding as his brothers shift in their cramped tomb, to the tremble that is his mother's pain, to the thin silence that follows the word destiny, because destiny never stays to help with cleanup. Beside him, Mnemosyne stirs. Memory shows him flashes Gaia's horizon face, Uranus unblinking and blue, the way hope feels right before it disappoints you. She does not tell him what will happen. Memory equips, it never predicts. Across from her, Themis, all angles and law, does not bless the act, but she does not forbid it. Order is not peace. Sometimes order arrives through cutting. He thinks of Oceanus, patient current wringing the world even here, of Hyperion, who dreams of light with a joy that borders on cruelty, of Rhea, yes. Even in the crush of bodies there is room for the thought of her whose presence gentles his edges without dulling them. He plans, not just the strike, but the afterward and no one else imagines. If he succeeds, there will be air, a lifting, a collapse. The first sound the world hears might be a gasp. He knows what power does. He has lived beneath it. A roof you cannot move and a love that smothers. He promises himself he will be different, that he will build an age where no one is forced back into a mother's body for daring to exist. Night lowers like always. The sky descends, cold blue weight. The world holds its breath. The sickle rests along Cronus's forearm. The edge is not perfectly smooth. Nothing made by a desperate hand ever is. Gaia's attention gathers. Not applause, but a steadying hand. He does not look for permission. There is no such thing anymore, only for the rhythm. The instant the sky is close enough to hurt. He counts 1, 2 on 3 he moves. The motion is simple, the way terrible decisions are simple at their core. He rises from the dark like a blade being unsheathed. No shout, no warning. He angles the rock at the softest place and cuts. The sound is not thunder. It is a wet, stunned hush, as if the world has bitten its own tongue. Blood falls in a rain never seen before. Uranus reels. The sky, for the first time, loses its arrogance. He tears away, staggered. In the gap between earth and sky, air, a new thing, pours in and keeps pouring. Gaia gasps, and the gasp goes on until it invents wind. Cronus stands with the sickle dripping. For a moment he is not the youngest. He is the hinge of history. Triumph does not arrive. Cold does, followed by the practical itch of next steps. He frees his brothers and sisters fully, not just from the sky, but from the habit of flinching. The others emerge blinking, bruised, bewildered. Some look at him with gratitude, some with calculation. Hyperion laughs too loudly. Themis measures the distance between cruelty and justice, and finds it subjective. Oceanus keeps moving, as rivers do. Rhea touches his wrist where the stone has rubbed his skin raw, and mercy floods him like warm water. There is a cost. The blood of a god does not vanish like rain. Where it strikes the ground, the Erinyes rise with eyes that remember every debt. The split that made room for breath leaks consequences. Cronus feels the first prick of it in his chest, a question with teeth. If his father could be unseated, so can he. He hates the thought and clings to it. He had promised himself he would be different. Different is not a plan. It is a posture. He knows power too well to be naive. He will shape it, contain it, soften edges where he can and harden them where he must. Prophecy does not ask permission. The whisper moves anyway. Too soft to locate. Too clear to ignore what you did to him will be done to you. He files the sentence where he files every threat on a shelf labelled later. He looks up at the wound in the sky, at widening blue. Space is not emptiness. It is invitation. He imagines an age under his hand fields, seasons, a calm so dependable people forget to notice it. The world bends toward habit. He could teach it the right ones. He lowers the sickle. Gaia exhales. Mountains lift their shoulders. The earth tests its freedom with small quakes. The Furies take their first steps. They are not interested in his age or intentions. Cronus decides he will rule, not because he craves a throne, he tells himself, but because someone must. He will call it the Golden Age, a phrase that tastes noble. In private, he admits the gold he imagines is the colour of safety, not virtue. He wants a world that does not press back, praise that does not argue, quiet, mistaken for peace. He walks across the new air to a height that will earn a name. He gestures. Things obey. Rivers choose courses. Winds adopt directions. Time learns to pace itself. He sets tasks the way a careful parent sets chores. Convinced work will keep the household from fighting. He drafts rules the way a mason lays stones close, interlocking, leaving little room for accidents or dissent. He pretends the rules are gifts. He tells himself people sleep better when expectations are clear. That calm is a form of kindness. He pictures festivals with simple songs, harvests that arrive on time, children who never learn the word upheaval. Vision warms him. It startles him, because in it he sees his father's shadow, tidied up and rebranded as mercy, below. Rhea watches the way you watch a bright flame when your hands are cold drawn, wary, hopeful, afraid. Themis watches and makes no comment. Mnemosyne remembers for everyone. Oceanus keeps circling, because circling is what he does. Hyperion already choreographs daylight. Gaia rests not uninjured, not entirely relieved, but rests. The sky keeps its distance. Night comes. Wind moves through trees that have not grown yet. Cronus feels the sickle against his palm and does not put it down. The blade that frees is the blade that governs. He understands that too well. He tells himself it is only for a while, only until the world learns to behave. In the dark, the whisper files itself under later again. For now, the youngest wears certainty like armour. For now, the world believes him. The night that followed was different. The air tasted new, thinner yet sharper, as if the world itself had discovered lungs. Cronus stood on ground that no longer trembled under his father's weight, and for the first time he felt tall without anyone pressing him down. But victory has a way of spoiling quickly. The wound he carved into Uranus didn't close. It gaped, bleeding consequence into creation. From the drops that struck the soil came shapes no one had seen before. Furies, black-winged and relentless, eyes burning with the memory of every wrong. Giants, their footsteps shaking valleys into being, each movement a promise of chaos. Strange nymphs and creatures rose from the ground as though the earth herself wanted witnesses to what had been done. And out at sea, where the flesh of Uranus had fallen, the water frothed, foam gathered, thick and white, curling like a tide that refused to recede. From it stepped Aphrodite fully formed, glowing. Beauty made flesh from brutality. In a single heartbeat, the universe revealed one of its cruelties, that horror and splendour are often born in the same breath. Cronus stared, his knuckles still white around the sickle. He had expected release, a clean end. Instead, he saw that endings spill, and blood doesn't respect boundaries. The creatures rising weren't his allies. They weren't his enemies either. They were something worse reminders. Every time he looked at them, he would remember the cost of the choice he made. The Titans gathered, their faces lit by the first true night sky. Hyperion grinned as stars began to burn overhead, as if his hands had finally been given a canvas. Oceanus rippled with delight, his waters free to flow without a ceiling pressing down. Themis tilted her head, already calculating what order could be built from this mess. Mnemosyne simply watched, committing it all to memory, with a kind of expression that made Cronus feel as if she were carving his deeds into stone. Gaia was quiet. Relief softened her, but it was not joy. Her body still carried the scars of children forced back inside her, and her heart now bore the weight of what one of those children had done. She did not look at Cronus as a savior. She looked at him as someone she had armed, and who had made his choice. And Uranus, what remained of him, did not vanish. He retreated, bleeding sky into the horizon, torn and humiliated, but not silent. His voice reached Cronus not as thunder, not as light, but as a curse that wrapped around every ear willing to hear. As you have done to me, so will your child do to you. Power devours itself. Remember this. Boy. The words chilled Cronus more than the blood on his hands. He laughed outwardly, a laugh meant to sound victorious, but inside he was already cataloguing the threat. He looked at Rhea, at the sisters and brothers standing free beside him, and he realized the future would not be peace but vigilance. To protect what he had taken, he would need to watch every cradle, every womb, every new life as if it carried a knife. The Golden Age, as people would later call it, began not with musical feasts but with a man gripping a blade he could not put down. Cronus declared himself Lord of the Cosmos, ruler of a world pried open by violence. He promised abundance, a life without fear, and for a time it looked real. Crops grew rich, rivers stayed steady, seasons arrived like clockwork. But in Cronus's eyes lived the paranoia of someone who knew prophecy doesn't care about promises. He kept the sickle near, a constant shadow in the glow of prosperity. The Titans lived in freedom, but they also lived in the echo of their father's mutilation, a reminder that the same act that freed them had chained their future to suspicion. Aphrodite smiled in the foam, a goddess of love birthed by hatred, her very existence proof that beauty and blood are never far apart. And the Furies circled quietly, not choosing sides, but waiting. Cronus smiled when he could, but every laugh felt brittle. The curse of Uranus lingered behind his teeth. He had proven he was brave enough to strike, clever enough to win, patient enough to wait. But patience was a habit that turns sour when it outlives its purpose. He found himself waiting again, this time not for a chance at power, but for the knife promised by prophecy. Waiting for his child to become him. He tries to sleep, but sleep is a shallow pond now. Never deep, never still. When he closes his eyes, he feels the sickle's curve in his palm, even when it sits on a shelf beside the throne. At dawn, he forces himself to look out, not up. He begins with kindness, because kindness is the easiest mask for control. Fields are taught to ripen in order. Rivers are coaxed into predictable moods. Hyperion lifts daylight on time. Oceanus loops the world like a belt, content to be the horizon's pulse. Themis drafts codes that sound like lullabies, rules promising no one will be surprised again. Mnemosyne collects firsts the first festival without fear, the first night breeze that belongs to mortals. From a distance it looks like a golden age harvests that arrive like clockwork, rain that behaves, sleep that returns to tired bodies without bargaining. Rhea walks new hills and tries to believe. She picks up small creatures and holds them like good news carefully, already aware of how light empty hands can feel. Cronus watches and counts it as proof. If life is quiet, prophecy must be quiet too. He keeps the sickle close as a symbol, like a scepter polished more than used. He tells himself he has learned from violence. He will make stability so complete no one will reach for a blade again. He says it to Rhea with a smile that almost convinces her. He says it to himself with a voice that never convinces him. Silence. he discovers, is difficult to manage. It remembers. At the edge of orchards, the Furies stand like crows on a fence, patient and interested. At the shore, a woman steps from the last curl of a wave as casually as leaving a bath. Aphrodite surveys a world engineered for restraint and smiles, the kind of smile that undoes restraint. He convenes a council in a hall cut from the mountain's ribs. Titans gather, their presence changing the temperature the way weather does. We will keep this world simple, Cronus says. Order is a kindness. Surprise is a tax the weak cannot afford. Themis nods at part of the sentence and ignores the rest. Order is not a cure, she says. It's a promise to pay attention. Rhea's voice moves, soft but unafraid. We freed the trapped, she says. Let the freed breathe. He answers gently because gentleness makes refusal sound like care. Breath needs structure, he says. Otherwise it becomes a gasp. He does not announce the decision he has already made. In the night, a thought arrived wearing Prudence's face if his father imprisoned the Cyclops and the 100-handed. Perhaps a wise son will do the same, only cleaner, kinder, under rules that use the word necessary. With a small retinue and no fanfare he descends. Tartarus opens. The path tastes of iron. Chains remember wrists. The Cyclops look up from soot and anvils they never stopped dreaming about. Briareus and his brothers shift. The sound is like boulders becoming avalanches. Cronus lifts his hands in a gesture meaning peace in some languages and stay where you are in others. You were wronged, he says. Words not entirely false, but the world is young, its bones still set. Your strength startles the earth. Rest a little longer. I will not bury you. I will bind you in certainty. You will be kept, not cast away. He calls it mercy. Tartarus calls it repetition. Rhea finds him there and does not recognize the softness in his voice. Softness like velvet around a gag. Let them work, she says. If they must be here, let them build. Give their hands a purpose that isn't only holding still. He hesitates. They may forge, he says at last, but only what is asked. No gifts not requested. He imagines a clever artisan placing a weapon in some younger hand. His throat tightens. He calls it prudence. Word travels. Mortals begin to shape clay and hum to the wind. They learn the etiquette of this piece. Do not speak of the wound in the sky. Do not tell stories where blame has a proper name. Be grateful for rules. A season turns. Hyperion's light grows confident. Soil becomes generous. The golden age shines enough to be believed, and yet the seams show if you stand close. Oceanus notices his currents turn tidy where they once turned wild. Themis watches disputes settle so cleanly that nobody learns how to disagree. Mnemosyne stores quiet like grain and wonders what will sprout. Cronus studies ruling the timing of proclamations, the politeness of surveillance, the trick of making a lesson look like celebration. Festivals bloom, songs repeat until they feel like truth. He allows love to be praised because love looks harmless when it's beautiful. He forgets that Aphrodite's first step was out of a wound. At night he walks the ridge where the sky is closest. He tells himself he admires the stars. He's counting the distance between them. The Furies visit dreams to remind. They sit on the edge of pillows. When a sleeper startles, they tilt their heads. Do you remember what paid for your quiet? Most sleepers sink again. Rhea wakes and stays awake. One evening, Aphrodite passes a field where young lovers have left footprints like a constellation in mud. She laughs softly and touches the barley heads. By morning, every stalk leans toward every other. Cronus orders the wind to straighten it. The wind obeys. That night the lovers do not meet. The barley stands at attention and learns the posture of a kingdom. Rhea comes to him, not to plead, but to place a truth where he can see it. Order that cannot bear a mess is not order, she says. It's fear wearing a crown. He almost jokes, but hears the tremor in her voice and chooses a different weapon. Fear protects what it loves, he says. I won't apologize for keeping the world from breaking. The world is not a shell you can hold uncracked, she says. It is a shell that becomes a bird. He stares because love makes you listen to metaphors you would discard from anyone else. Birds fall, he says, and the sentence tastes like his father's breath. When stories of small miracles appear, a net of silver offered by the sea, a fever-kissed away Themis warns that kindness without law becomes a debt with no account. Oceanus and Aphrodite ignore her and keep adding colour to the shoreline. Cronus declares a festival to thank the powers. Gratitude. Again. Music. Again. Rhea dances with her sisters. Mnemosyne watches faces and learns how joy can still look like caution. After dark, he steps away from lanterns to breathe alone. The stars are so clean they glitter like teeth. He tries to imagine a child's hand in his and finds the picture unreliable. He tries to imagine a child's hand on his throat and finds the picture clear. Beyond the ridge, a sound rings a hammer, striking something that should not sing a cyclops forging what was not asked. He does not run. He walks. Because walking is what rulers do when they are about to be cruel and want it to look like thoughtfulness. In the cavern, a single eye glows with reflected fire. The anvil shines like a calm idea. "What are you shaping?" he asks. "A possibility," the Cyclops says. The lines in the metal suggest a throw, a crack, a vanishing, a weapon that travels so fast the air forgets it passed. He sees how it might fit a hand that is not his, a hand that will one day be his problem. "Unmake it," he says. Voice, almost kind. "You cannot unring a bell," the Cyclops replies, "but you can refuse to hear it." Cronus closes his hand around the sickle. He had brought it without admitting it. He does not use it. He breaks the mold instead. He orders new chains, made of rules, not iron. Nothing forged without 3 names on a tablet. Nothing carried from the pit without an escort. Nothing imagined without permission. On his way back, he passes the barley again. It has learned to stand straight. The lovers have learned not to hope for wind. From a hill above the sleeping festival, Rhea watches him return and knows. She does not know the words, yet there will be words, and they will taste like stone, but she knows the curve of a future that calls itself safe and means silent. Dawn repeats. It feels carefully rehearsed. Hyperion is pleased. Oceanus circles. Themis files another guideline. Mnemosyne adds a page to a book nobody else can see. The Furies count. Aphrodite smiles at a mirror and the mirror smudges, promising trouble. The golden age holds. You can pick it up. It is heavy. If you tap it with a fingernail, it rings like metal and prophecy both. Cronus stands in the sound and tells himself the ringing is music. The nights grow quieter, but Cronus cannot rest inside them. He lies awake, listening to the pulse of prophecy. Every time Rhea moves beside him, his chest tightens with suspicion he calls foresight. The whisper of his father's curse keeps threading through him. Your child will do to you what you did to me. It is not thunder anymore. It is a lullaby gone sour, playing even when no one sings. When Rhea brings him their first child, Hestia, he stares too long. The baby's breath is soft, warm as milk, but all he hears is a blade sharpening. He takes her from Rhea's arms, presses his lips to the small forehead, and then swallows her whole. The act is smooth, practiced, horrifying in its casualness. Rhea gasps, reaching, but Cronus wipes his mouth as if he'd eaten bread. "She's safe," he says, voice calm, "safe inside me, away from prophecy." Rhea screams at him, the sound raw enough to scratch stone. But Cronus does not break. He insists the child lives within him, guarded, unreachable. He convinces himself that by devouring, he is preserving. Love twisted into logic, fear dressed as mercy. The cycle repeats. Demeter follows, then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon. Each time Rhea pleads, bargains, curses. Each time Cronus explains with the steady patience of a man explaining why fire burns or rivers flood. It must be so. The world cannot risk a successor. I will not let history repeat. He tells himself he is different from Uranus, that he swallows not from disgust but from protection. Yet the children's muffled cries inside his gut remind him too much of Gaia's torment. Rhea withers beneath this weight. She moves through palaces and fields like a ghost, her arms aching with absence. Mortals see her face and whisper of grief they cannot name. Festivals become hollow. What good is harvest when the hearth is empty? Even Themis, who values law, begins to measure the cracks. Mnemosyne refuses to speak near Cronus, afraid her words will become records he cannot stomach. Gaia watches, older than all of them, and feels a pattern replaying. Sky crushed her with children, now her son devours his. The cycle bends but never breaks. She mourns that even liberation becomes another cage. When Rhea carries her 6th child, desperation drives her to secrecy. She retreats to a cave far from Kronos' watch. Her body curled against stone as if stone might hide her. Pain racks her, but with it comes resolve. She will not let another life vanish down that unholy throat. As the child's cry breaks into the air, she sees both terror and hope. Tiny fists clench at nothing, yet promise everything. She names him Zeus, though she whispers it, as if names themselves might betray her. Rhea knows she cannot face Kronos directly, so she weaves a trick. She takes a stone, heavy and cold, swaddles it in cloth, and rocks it in her arms. When Kronos comes demanding the child, she presents the bundle. His eyes, already lined with paranoia, do not question. He swallows the stone whole, sighs with grim satisfaction, and believes himself safe again. But Zeus is hidden away. Carried to Crete under the cloak of night, nymphs cradle him, feeding him milk and honey. The goat Amalthea bends to nourish him, her breath steaming in the cool cave air. Outside, the Curettes clash their shields together, a cacophony of noise to drown his infant cries. Every clang is a promise no one will hear him. No one will find him. For the first time in years, Rhea breathes deeply. It is not victory Kronos still sits on the throne. Children still trapped inside him, but it is possibility. She presses her lips to the stone that once fooled her husband, and thinks deception can be as sharp as any sickle. And somewhere inside Kronos' vast, uneasy stomach, his swallowed children stir. They are not gone, not broken. They wait, alive and burning with anger, the prophecy humming through their blood louder than any lullaby. They hide him in a cave that smells like milk and wet stone. At night the mountain exhales and the air cools enough to sting, and in that chill the baby sleeps through the clatter of bronze that keeps him alive. Outside, the Curettes dance in a ring and hammer shield to shield, a bright noise stitched into darkness, masking any cry that might drift down the rock and betray him. Inside, the goat Amalthea lowers her head, and the child feeds with an intensity that makes the nymphs laugh and then go quiet. Laughter feels dangerous here. So does silence. Everything is measured: how long the fire burns, how fast the smoke climbs, how often the boy can be held before anyone risks loving him too loudly. He grows fast, like the mountain's idea of time has been lent to his bones. The nymphs Adrastea and Ida teach him to walk by, letting him wander the slopes until his feet learn where the loose gravel waits. He falls, he bleeds. The cuts stiffen and then vanish, as if his body considers injury an optional opinion. When storms coil around the peak, he stands with his back to the wind and grins. Not because he isn't cold, but because cold is a teacher that doesn't waste words. Rhea visits rarely, always disguised, always with the posture of someone who has memorized every footstep that won't betray her. She brings little things that feel large cloth she wove herself, a string of dried figs, a story that stops just before it reaches home. She never says his name. Names have edges. Names can catch on ears. She touches his hair and marvels at how quickly it is becoming a man's hair, heavy with future. She leaves before sunrise, every time, and spends the walk back to the palace convincing her face to forget what it just remembered. At first the cave is a cradle, then a classroom. He learns the temper of stone, how it holds heat if you speak gently to it with fire. He learns that the sound of his own breath can become a metronome when the fear tries to sprint. He learns that power is a hand that can lift or close. He practices lifting. He practices not closing. In sleep, the mountain gives him other teachers. Dreams arrive with the certainty of messengers. He sees a woman whose eyes hold maps Themis, and she does not tell him what is right so much as show him what is fragile. He sees another whose voice pours like water, Mnemosyne, and from her he understands that forgetting is a kind of theft. Once, in a night where the stars refuse to blink, the earth herself speaks through root and drip and weight. Gaia is not warm or cold. She is inevitable. Do not mistake stillness for safety. She murmurs. Stillness is only the pause between decisions. He asks about fathers without saying the word. The nymphs tell him stories of the sky and keep their faces turned slightly away. Amalthea bumps him when he broods too long. She is practical, a teacher of appetite and balance. From her he learns that hunger is holy if it is honest, and that feeding can be a promise. not a violation. One afternoon her horn catches against a rock and breaks, and he gathers it up, curved, luminous. A fragment that looks like a crescent trapped in his palm. It becomes a vessel that never seems to empty. He offers it to the nymphs and pretends not to notice when they weep over simple fruits as if they've been forgiven. Years layer themselves across him like light. He grows into his height, into a quiet that isn't shyness, into a smile that makes people remember warmth they didn't know they missed. The Curets teach him to move with noise and without it. He can tread a ridge without turning a pebble, or he can arrive announced like weather. The cave mouth becomes a threshold he crosses easily now. He knows every fold of the mountain's cloak. News leaks up the slopes in cautious threads. The world below is calm in a way that feels curated. Festivals bloom on schedule. Disputes resolve before they begin. Babies are born and then do not grow into the noise of childhood. The sentences people use are tidy. Ria's face becomes a season with no spring. The boy listens and learns the shape of a hole by all the ways the story walks around it. One night he asks the Curets to stop their clamour. Just for a moment. They hesitate and then lower their shields. The mountain swallows the quiet and then gives it back. From deep inside that hush, he hears something like a heartbeat that isn't his. A crowd of heartbeats, slow and stubborn, trapped in a place where no one should be. He doesn't sleep after that. The nymphs do not ask why. They have the look of people who know what an answer costs. When storms return, he goes out to meet them. Lightning maps the sky in lines that look like handwriting, and he tries to read it. Thunder rolls over him and he imagines a language too old for mouths. He talks back anyway, not with words, but with the way he refuses to flinch. He learns that a body can be a bell that does not break when struck. By day he runs the goat paths until speed feels like honesty. He lifts stones until weight loses its threat. He tests himself against cold water and long climbs, but he hoards his fierceness. He spends most of his attention on thinking. How does a world stay gentle without being forced? How do you open something that doesn't want to open without becoming a knife? The answer arrives in pieces. Themis again, in a dream that feels more like memory. Power that proves itself by being seen as brittle. Power that proves itself by being useful cannot be dislodged without confession. He wakes with a plan that is not yet a plan, only a shape he will not shout. He will serve. He will place his hands where they cannot be refused on a cup, on a door, on a silence, and find the hinge. Rhea hears it in him before he speaks it. Mothers are cartographers of their children's tones. If you go down, she says, go like water. Stones know what to do with hammers. They have fewer ideas about rain. He laughs softly. I will be rain, he says. And the cave seems to exhale. Another teacher arrives, this one not in sleep. A woman appears at the cave mouth with footsteps that make the air lean toward her. She is Meti, whose name is the shape of strategy before anyone utters it. She does not bow. She sets a small clay jar on a rock and sits, as if the mountain invited her. You're late, he says, surprising himself. On time, she answers. You were not ready to hear this yesterday. She speaks of mixtures of herbs that remind a body it is full of what it tried to forget, of roots that coax the stomach to reverse its vows. There is an art to undoing, she says, just as there is to doing. Most rulers know one. The rare ones learn both. He doesn't touch the jar. If I use this, he says, I humiliate him. If you don't, she answers, you become him. They look at each other with the frankness of people who understand that kindness and necessity often share a coat. He trains his face to be useful. The nymphs teach him humility that isn't performance, how to carry water without announcing that he is carrying water, how to listen until the room tells you what it wants to hear. The Curetes teach him how to stand behind a throne without setting it on fire with his posture. The day he leaves, the mountain is blue with distance. Rhea ties a thin leather strap around his wrist. Nothing magical, nothing anyone would notice, except her hands shake. You are a secret, she says. Be a solution. He nods. He does not promise to be safe. Safety is a word for afternoons. He promises to come back with something broken open. The path down is a braid of danger and restraint. He passes villages where music sounds the same in every house, happiness shaved into compliance. He passes fields that stand too straight, as if the barley remembers the night the wind was told to stop helping lovers. He eats with shepherds who tell stories with holes in them. He feels nothing. He listens until their pause becomes a door he can see through. By the time he reaches the palace, he has learned how to appear smaller without feeling small. He enters as a servant enters, eyes lowered enough to avoid offense, raised enough to catch details. He feels the weight of his mother's absence in these halls like a draft that won't close. He tastes the air and finds it antiseptic with order. Cronus sits as if the throne grew from him. The sickle rests in easy reach, a habit more than a threat, but habits are how threats stay awake. Around him the court moves carefully, the way people move in rooms where glass is pretending to be stone. Zeus, though, no one uses his name weights. He learns where the wine is stored, who pours first, how the king likes his cup weighed in the hand before it touches his mouth. He pays attention to the moments when certainty loosens the joke that pulls a real laugh, the song that makes even Themis tilt her head, the hush at the end of a story before anyone remembers to clap. He learns Cronus's breathing the way sailors learn the wind not to fight, to time. At night he returns to a small cell without windows and holds the clay jar Metis gave him. He does not open it. He listens to it. Some objects have a sound the ear cannot hear, but the hand can. This one hums like a promise made by a river. One evening, a storm crawls over the horizon and parks itself above the palace. The hall fills with the kind of electricity that makes words taste like tin. Cronus is in a mood that looks like generosity from a safe distance. He calls for wine and more wine. He asks for music and then for silence and then for music again. People relax half an inch. It is enough. Zeus steps forward, not careless, not dramatic. He pauses. He waits until the king's attention drifts toward a story about a harvest that arrived early, as if time itself were eager to please, and then he tips a thread of the jar's contents into the cup. The mixture looks like nothing. It is the sort of magic that doesn't care to be seen. He carries the cup with both hands, not in reverence, in responsibility. Cronus takes it without looking at him. He drinks. The hall returns to its conversation, the kind where everyone pretends not to be measuring everyone else. Zeus retreats to the wall and watches the way a hunter watches the wind shift. Nothing happens, and then everything begins. He does not move. He does not smile. He lets the room keep its illusion a little longer, long enough for fate to feel like a natural consequence instead of a trick. In his chest, something old and quiet uncoils, not triumph, not relief, readiness. Outside, the storm speaks again. Inside, a king's body remembers what it swallowed and decides it can no longer bear it. The night leans in to listen. The first sound is not a roar but a gag, raw and human, stripped of every ounce of divinity. Cronus stiffens, his hands clutching at the throne's arms as his jaw clenches against a tide he cannot command. The court falls silent. A hush spreads like frost, each breath caught mid-air. Then it comes again, deeper, violent a retch that echoes through the marble like the earth itself is choking. He doubles over. The sickle clatters to the floor, its ring sharper than any shout. His body convulses, dragged by something older than his will. From his throat bursts not just bile, but life. Hestia first, gasping into the hall as though waking from a nightmare she cannot name. The crowd recoils, unsure if they are witnessing birth or blasphemy. Rhea rushes forward, her cry breaking the stillness. She cradles her daughter, weeping with relief, while Cronus collapses back against the throne, pale and trembling. It doesn't stop. His chest heaves, and from the cavern of his gut pours Demeter, slick with fear but fierce-eyed, clutching the air like she's seizing destiny itself. Hera follows, her scream not of terror but fury, aimed at the father who caged her. The sound makes even the pillars tremble. Hades emerges next, his face shadowed, quiet, gaze already turned downward as if the underworld is stitched into his bones. Then Poseidon crashes forth like a wave, coughing salt and rage, his body shuddering with the memory of confinement. Each child rises stronger than they should be, as if their years in darkness fermented into power. The hall is chaos now. Gasps, prayers, the shuffle of feet retreating toward the edges. Cronus clutches his stomach, sweat glistening like fear disguised as rain. He tries to speak, but the words dissolve into another spasm, and when it passes, the room is filled not with silence but with siblings standing side by side, blinking into freedom. Zeus does not step forward yet. He stays in the shadows, watching the air shift around his brothers and sisters. Hera's fury hardens the room. Poseidon shakes the hall with every breath. Demeter's hands leave trails of green where they grip the stone. Even Hestia, smallest of them all, radiates a steady calm that makes the frightened servants cling to her presence. Hades says nothing, but when his eyes lift, the torches dim as if light itself respects him. The prophecy has begun to take form, not in whispers but in bodies living, breathing, standing taller with each heartbeat. Cronus sees it and tries to rise. His hand reaches for the sickle, but it is too far, and his children are too close. Rhea steps between them, not as a shield but as a witness. She has carried despair for so long that standing upright now feels like vengeance. Her voice does not tremble. The world does not belong in your stomach, Cronus. It belongs in their hands. The words pierce him more than the sickle ever did. He sinks back, wheezing, clutching at the arms of a throne that suddenly feels too large. He had convinced himself devouring was protection, that fear was love in disguise. Now the proof of his delusion stands before him, glaring with eyes that are his own reflected back. Zeus finally steps into the light, not rushing, not crowing, just walking with the calm of someone who has already seen this moment in his bones. The others turn toward him instinctively, as if they'd been waiting not only for freedom but for a signal. He meets their eyes one by one, the quiet binding them more strongly than any chain ever could. The court is silent, a silence so thick it feels carved. Then Hera's voice slices through it. Farther, the word drips with venom. Poseidon's knuckles crack like waves smashing cliffs. Demeter touches Rhea's shoulder, grounding her. Hades exhales, and the room chills. Cronus shakes his head, disbelief painted across his face. But disbelief doesn't change the truth. The age of swallowing has ended. The age of reckoning has begun. The hall cannot hold the moment, so it breaks. Courtiers scatter like leaves, doors slam against stone, and the palace stops pretending to be calm. Rhea steadies Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Zeus steps forward, not to gloat, but to gather. This ends, he says, and the words do not rise, they root. Cronus forces himself upright. His face is ashen, breath ragged, body still learning how to be only one body again. He reaches for the sickle. Zeus sets his foot on the blade and meets his father's eyes with the look that is neither hate nor pity. There's a world outside your stomach, he says. We're going to give it air. Hours blur. Cronus retreats with titans, loyal to him. Oceanus's currents turn treacherous. Epetus sharpens spite into plans. Coeus and Creus rally the old order. Atlas, broad-shouldered and tireless, becomes their spine. They ascend Mount Othrys, a hard-backed fortress of rock. On Olympus, the younger gods step into roles that feel less chosen than discovered. Hestia raises a flame that refuses to be startled. Demeter moves through fields and the stalks bend toward her. Hera wipes blood from her cheek and starts a ledger of debts. Hades goes quiet in a way that chills without cold. Poseidon tests the sea like a horse he intends to ride. Zeus studies the wind, the stone, the nerves in every camp. Rhea, who spent years learning how to be smaller to survive, becomes large again. Large. She moves among mortals and nymphs, laying down rules of care that do not need a throne. Hide the children, she says. Store water high. If the ground trembles, stand in doorways that do not face the hill. War begins like weather. At first you think it might pass. Then the light changes. Cronus throws the first strike, a scything arc that shaves the top from a mountain and writes a new horizon. Olympus answers with thunder that arrives without warning. The air itself flinches. They do not fight alone. Othrys breathes fury through Atlas, who moves troops like he is rearranging continents. Themis stands at the margins and watches law unwind under speed. Mnemosyne records where each bolt lands and what it costs. Oceanus sends rivers up wrong valleys. Hyperion heaves daylight into the fray until noon stretches past sense. The younger gods improvise. Poseidon turns waves into shields and then hammers. Hades makes fear run away from him instead of at him. Hera shapes anger into strategy. Demeter grows thickets so fast that charging lines bog and sleep. Hestia keeps fire calm in homes that tremble. Zeus throws lightning once, twice, then watches how the echo crawls through stone, learning where noise becomes leverage. Cronus and Zeus meet in the open once that first season. There is no speech, only a wound staring at the hand that made it, and a hand staring at the wound it will someday be. They strike and are thrown apart by the noise. The earth remembers and keeps a bruise. Nights fill with small wars of patience. Scouts vanish. Water turns sweet where it was brackish, then brine where it was sweet. Oaths are made and broken with a speed that would be impressive if it weren't so exhausting. Atlas sleeps sitting up, chin tipped toward a sky he still believes he can bully. Rhea sits with mortals in caves and teaches them to count heartbeats to slow fear. After months, a rhythm emerges. Neither side can win cleanly. The Titans have age and reach. The gods have spite and invention. The stalemate is a wound that scabs and tears and scabs again. The Furies perch along ridges and keep score with the patience of accountants who don't accept tips. Cronus dreams of his father's curse until the dream becomes a condition. He tells himself if he can outlast youth, youth will become him and stop fighting. He tightens his grip on the past, more fortifications, more rules, more rehearsals of victory. The more he speaks of certainty, the more his soldiers learn to whisper. Atlas measures his king with a practical eye. He owes Cronus his post and his purpose, but not flattery. Strength isn't a speech, he says, barely above wind. He adds stones to a wall no one wants to make. Zeus studies, and the study is its own weapon. He walks the lines and asks the lowest among them what they fear most and what they need. He learns fear is not always of blades. Often it is hunger, sleep that will not come, not knowing if home still stands. He replies with small mercies that add up food where food runs out, quiet where quiet is devoured, the rumour that someone is listening and intends to do more than nod. One night he meets Rhea on a path carved by both sides' boots. They stand 6 paces apart, finally letting the grief show. This doesn't end on a mountain, she says. It ends in a choice that feels like breathing and hurts like drowning. He nods, and the nod already carries years. The second year brings inventions. Poseidon cracks bedrock and sends fountains under Titan camps. Hyperion blinds valleys with noon at midnight until Hestia teaches mortals to weave shade. Demeter moves orchards overnight. Hera sets traps using courtesy and leaves enemies tangled in their own confidence. Hades begins to collect the dead, not as prizes, but as promises kept. Year 3 breeds the first famous betrayal, though bards will never agree whose. Some say Iapetus tried to sell Atlas. Others say a young god flinched and left a gate unbarred. Mnemosyne refuses to clarify. Memory is not a courtroom, she says. It is a city with fog. Winters lean hard. Silence is not peace but exhaustion. Zeus warms his hands at a hut fire where mortals sleep 3 to a blanket. The oldest woman nods. If you mean to be a king, she says, learn to sit by other people's fires without making it about you. He laughs. Yes, Mom, he says, and means it. Years 4 through 7 pass in attrition. Names fade faster than graves can be dug. The Furies grow heavier on their perches. Rhea becomes a network food caches, hidden paths, small songs to keep children from shaking. Hera forges alliances out of insults. Poseidon breaks a cliff and likes it too much. Hestia keeps teaching how to relight what goes out. Atlas sleeps on his feet, shoulders hunched as if rehearsing a burden no one has assigned him yet. The 8th year belongs to rumour. A whisper moves that Zeus is hunting older allies, something deeper than Titans, and Cronus laughs too loudly each time he hears it. He is a boy with a stolen cup, he says, and his generals smile thinly. The 9th year brings a stalemate so complete it feels like law. Both sides speak as if war is a season the world must endure, like winter expected and survivable. That is when it becomes dangerous. Nothing kills faster than what people accept. On the 10th year's first morning, the skies are blue, as if the world is trying to apologize for everything. Zeus wakes before the camp and feels the apology like a dare. He looks toward Othrys and thinks of depths rather than heights. He remembers Metis's jar, the way small things undo large ones. He remembers the cave, the ring of bronze, the goat's steady breath, and that power which is useful cannot be easily dislodged. He calls no counsel. He moves like a rumour, quiet and fast. He He heads not up the mountain, but down toward a mouth in the earth that has waited longer than any throne. Behind him the air holds its breath, on Othrys. Cronus feels the change without knowing its name. He orders Atlas to harden the lines and expect a storm. Atlas sets his jaw. For once, the sky refuses to cooperate. It is too beautiful for fear. He shouts anyway. Rhea, sitting with a village where the soup is thin, looks up and smiles without reason. Listen, she tells a child. Do you hear it? The child shakes her head. Exactly, Rhea says. Exactly. Between those who build walls and those who count heartbeats, the world waits. The war of generations stands at the cliff of its own story. Somewhere beneath all of them, something old opens one eye. Zeus descends into the dark with only the hum of memory to light his steps. The cave breathes hot, a throat leading straight into the stomach of the world. Tartarus is not silence, it is sound bent wrong. Chains grind against rock even when no one moves. The walls pulse like veins carrying regret. Every step feels watched by something that is not eyes. He knows this is where his father's enemies were buried, and also where allies might be hiding, if he can stand the cost of setting them loose. The Hecatoncheires stir first. Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges. Their 100 hands twitch against their bonds, scraping like forests collapsing. 50 heads lift in jerks, each voice muttering fragments of thought that merge into a storm. You've come late, one says. You've come right, another insists. Their eyes blaze not with welcome but with recognition. They remember being cast down by Uranus, then by Cronus, and they do not trust freedom easily. Zeus steps closer anyway, his voice level. You are not monsters. You are the weight my father feared. Be the weight that breaks him now. The words ripple through their many mouths until they settle into something like agreement. Then the Cyclopes, squatting in the shadows, lift their single burning eyes. They had forged in secret even here. Hammers striking anvils that no chains could silence, Arges, Brontes, and stirrups hold out their creations, not to Cronus, but to the one bold enough to walk into their prison. Lightning wrapped in iron, a trident carved from the ribs of mountains, a helm that erases its wearer from sight, gifts born of resentment, hardened into loyalty. They do not ask if he is worthy. They decide he must be. Zeus lifts the thunderbolt. The air vibrates as though relieved to meet its master. Poseidon takes the trident, and the ocean far above responds with a roar no one on the surface understands. Hades draws the helm over his head, vanishes from sight, and the cavern trembles with a fear older than language. Together, the brothers look at each other for the first time as more than survivors. They are weapons now, sharpened not by choice but by necessity. Back on Othrys, Cronus feels it. He cannot name it, but the marrow in his bones goes cold. He snarls at Atlas to strengthen the lines, at Oceanus to flood valleys, at Hyperion to blind the skies with endless noon. Orders snap from him like sparks, but sparks cannot stop the quake of inevitability. Among the Titans, divisions begin to crack. Oceanus mutters that rivers should circle, not drown. Themis stands apart, law written on her face but torn between blood and balance. Mnemosyne whispers memory into the ears of both camps, reminding them of what was lost and what could be if cycles don't break. Even some who once fought for Cronus look down the mountain and wonder if they are fighting against the future itself. Atlas alone never doubts. His shoulders square under burdens not yet given, his fists closing around the idea that if the sky falls again, he will hold it. He sees Cronus faltering, but loyalty is his marrow. He would rather break beneath the heavens than bend toward Zeus. The war stretches. Titans clash against their freed kin with noise so loud it shakes myths loose from reality. Hecatoncheires throw boulders like hail, scattering legions. The Cyclops forges light the night, arming the young gods with weapons the world has never seen. Cronus wields the sickle still, but its song is tired, dulled by years of repetition. Each swing cuts air more than flesh. Zeus stands at the front, thunder in his hands, but he does not rush. He times his strikes, lets the world learn what it means to have a sky that answers to him. Mortals in distant villages look up when storms split clean lines across the heavens. They whisper his name without knowing why. The prophecy that once haunted him becomes a chorus outside his control. On nights when both armies rest, Fires burn across hills like constellations too close to the ground. Themis walks through them all, listening, and says nothing. Rhea tends the wounded regardless of side. Mnemosyne fills the air with memories until even enemies cry, though they cannot say for what. In those pauses, the truth is sharp. This war is not only about gods, it is about whether power will always taste of fear. When dawn breaks after one such night, Zeus looks out from Olympus. In his chest, the thunder hums steady, patient, waiting. He knows the final storm is coming, not because he wills it, but because the world itself leans toward it. Cronus watches from Othrys and grips his sickle, pretending he cannot feel the handle slipping in his palm. The mountain range between them seems to shrink. The earth groans as if bracing for impact. Both sides know it now. The war of generations is nearly ready to decide itself. Dawn tries to look innocent, but everyone feels the shift. The light comes in clean, without apology, as if the sky already knows whose hands will hold it next. Zeus climbs out of the dark with the Hecaton Kyries at his back, and the Cyclops' fire still clinging to his clothes. He doesn't announce what he's brought. He doesn't need to. The air does it for him, crackling, awake, full of an impatience that isn't quite anger and isn't quite joy. Hestia is the first to meet him. She doesn't ask questions. She reads the room like a hearth reads a house. Her flame brightens a shade you can't measure, but you can feel behind your ribs. Demeter follows, touching his shoulder as if checking a crop for ripeness. Hera watches longer, measuring consequences before she decides what to bless. Poseidon grins the kind of grin that belongs to storms and brothers. Somewhere near the edge of the camp, Hades' shadow thickens and then thins, the helm already teaching the world to forget where he stands. Behind Zeus, Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges unfurl like mountains standing up. Their 100 hands loosen and test the air, learning the weight of freedom one knuckle at a time. Their many voices aren't loud so much as layered. When they agree, the sound feels like a landscape choosing a season. The Cyclopes step out last Argias with sparks in his beard, Brontes with thunder in his wrists, Sterops with a hammer that hums when no one touches it. They nod to no one and to everyone. Work waits. Zeus raises the thunderbolt and the sky flinches not in fear, in recognition. Poseidon takes the trident, and a far-off cliff caves as if the ocean merely cleared its throat. Hades draws the helm. He doesn't vanish entirely. He becomes a thought people keep losing track of. Hera watches all this with the steadfast disgust of a strategist forced to complement good tools. If you break the world to fix it, she says, fix it better than you found it. He nods. He's already thinking in shapes larger than victory, and law without cruelty, force without appetite, a sky that answers without devouring. They move before noon. The Hecatonkaiads lead, not because they're loudest, but because even the ground believes them. Boulders lift as if ropes are attached to the sky. Trees do not break. They step aside. The Cyclops forges bloom behind the lines, and every object they make feels inevitable spears that don't miss because missing isn't in their story. Shields that turn blows into rumours, nails that persuade wood to behave like loyalty. On Othrys, Atlas notices clouds organising themselves into a plan. He rests his hands on the rampart like a man testing lumber. He's brought the deep ones. He tells Cronus. The pit breathes with him. Cronus bares his teeth the way men do when they wish they had fangs. Then we'll teach the pit manners. He sends Iphitus to the east ridge, Creus to the west, Coeus to stitch the middle with old oaths, and orders Oceanus to drown the lowlands. Oceanus hesitates just a heartbeat. But even rivers have consciences. Themis watches, law on her tongue like a question she's tired of asking. Mnemosyne wanders the ranks, putting names back into mouths that have been calling each other soldier for too long. The first collision isn't even a battle, it's a correction. Briareus throws a hill. The hill obliges. Cottus claps his hands and two valleys discover they never liked each other. Gyges picks up a wall and sets it down where it will argue less with the wind. Titans who've never learned how to be surprised learn it now. Zeus doesn't run. He arranges. He threads lightning through the gaps the 100-handed carve. Not to dazzle, but to seal. His bolts don't just break, they teach stone which direction to remember. Poseidon heaves the sea inland in long. Low pulses, no grandstanding waves. Just relentless water persuading the ground to find lower versions of itself. Hades disappears and reappears, and each time he emerges, someone important has misplaced their courage. He doesn't kill, he edits. Cronus holds the center with a steadiness that would be admirable in any other story. The sickle sings again, less tired now, sharpened by necessity and rage. He cuts at the air where Zeus had been and is again, carving crescents of threat that slice through trees and leave the scent of green grief behind. Atlas anchors the line. When a boulder the size of a boast hurtles toward them, he lifts his shoulder and lets it break across him. The crack runs away into the mountain like a rumour that can't find a home. For a time, no one gains. Then Metis' lesson finds its hour. Zeus stops aiming at bodies and starts aiming at habits. He strikes not the shield but the wrist that always raises it too soon. He throws not at the general, but at the flag everyone glances at when they forget what to do. He turns noon into fog and then back into noon, until Hyperion stumbles in his own light. He waits for Oceanus to circle, then meets him with a kindness that isn't gentle space enough to do what water was born to do. Oceanus lowers his arms. Some duties are older than orders. Hera catches a gap in the Titan ranks, a polite hole formed where courtesies were exchanged instead of commands, and pours 3 squads into it like a pointed apology. Demeter roots the soft ground behind them. Retreat becomes a field that won't let go. Hestia keeps the camps lit and quiet. So news travels the way it should, warm and true and quicker than panic. Rhea walks among mortals who have come to watch from far hills because people always watch history even when it can kill them. She shows them where to stand, where not to breathe, where to hide their children and their hope. In her mouth, fear turns into instructions. In their hands, instructions become survival. Themis steps onto a ridge. Enough, she says to no one and to everyone. Her voice doesn't carry far, law never does in a storm, but those who hear it slow half a step and think about what it costs to speed up again. Mnemosyne stands beside her. Remember, she whispers. And soldiers recall the names of people who will ask them who they were when this is over. Cronus feels his line bow. He refuses to call it bend. Atlas, he says. Atlas doesn't answer with words. He puts both hands to the sky, not because it is falling yet, but because he can feel it thinking about it. He bears the hint of a weight, and becomes the rumour of a man built for burdens. The sight steadies the Titans the way a lighthouse steadies sailors who know better than to trust lighthouses. Zeus sees that too and does not try to break Atlas. He goes around him as you go around a mountain, not because you are afraid, but because the mountain isn't your argument. He aims for Cronus's certainty instead. He throws a bolt that doesn't strike flesh. It strikes the shadow of the throne in Cronus's mind, cracking the idea that he can outlast prophecy by pretending it's a story told about someone else. The crack shows. Cronus falters. For one breath, the sickle dips a degree. In that thin angle, Hades appears behind him, no strike. No blade, just a cold reminder pressed to the back of the neck. You are not the only one who knows how to swallow. Cronus shudders and wheels. Hades is gone, and the shudder remains. Poseidon drives his trident into the earth. The plane ripples, then splits. Trenches yawn where there had been confidence. Lines wobble. Hera pushes. Demeter pulls the ground over fleeing feet like a mother tucking in a child who insists he isn't tired. The 100-handed rainstones. The Cyclops turn night into a forge. Atlas braces harder. The sky leans the way a tired man leans on a doorframe. For a heartbeat, the world looks like it could tip into a new shape right now. But endings get shy when stared at. They prefer to be chosen, not watched. Zeus lowers the thunder in his palm. Not yet, he says, and the command is to himself. He could push. He could make this the last page, but pushing now would break too much to fix. He wants a world to inherit, not a ruin to occupy. He signals retreat, not the kind that tastes like failure, the kind that tastes like decision. The gods pull back in clean lines. The Titans do not chase. No one has the breath to pretend they aren't grateful. Evening slides down the mountains. Fires pop. Across the split valley, 2 camps watch each other the way people watch their past selves, with contempt, with pity, with a grief that won't admit its name. Themis counts the living because the dead will keep. Mnemosyne tells a story so soft it could be a prayer, and for a few minutes the war forgets to listen to itself. Cronus sits with his sickle across his knees and calculates. He does not admit that calculation now includes fear he cannot domesticate. Atlas stands with his hands pressed to a sky that is not his yet. and would be a poor gift if it were. Oceanus drifts toward the edge of the field, unwilling to drown a world that has started to remember its own throat. Hyperion props his brightness on a staff and tries not to hate the dark for making sense. Zeus walks the lines, not as a hero returning from a victory, but as a craftsman checking the scaffolding before the final lift. He stops by Hestia's fire and warms his hands until the feeling returns. He thanks Demeter for making the ground kinder. He praises Hera not for winning, but for refusing to waste what she won. He nods to Poseidon, who snorts like a horse and pretends he doesn't need the nod. Hades stands nearby like a shadow that has learned manners. Rhea meets him at the edge of camp. She doesn't ask why he held back, she knows. Mercy isn't softness, it's engineering. Tomorrow, she says. He looks at the sky that seems to be listening. Soon, he answers, and that single word settles everyone who hears it because it holds restraint and promise in equal parts. Night arrives gentle for once, as if the world is negotiating with itself. On Othrys, Cronus orders double watches. On Olympus, Zeus orders extra bread. Between the mountains, the Furies roost and take notes with that annoying fairness that pays no attention to banners. The final gambit isn't thunder or blood. It is patience sharpened into inevitability. When dawn comes again, the world will be tilted just enough that a push becomes a fall. And somewhere in that tilt, a sun who learned to be rain will decide where to land the storm. Morning breaks like a verdict. The air tastes sharp, as if the sky has finally chosen a side. Zeus stands at the ridge above the valley, thunderbolt humming in his grip, and knows the war has stretched as far as it can without breaking. The Titans wait on Othrys, their banners stiff in the mountain wind. Cronus sits at the centre, the sickle across his knees, face set in a mask that even he no longer believes. When the signal comes, it isn't a shout. It's a silence clean, decisive, heavy enough to tip the scales. The Hecatoncheires surge forward, their 100 arms throwing boulders that block out the sun. The Cyclops ignite the field with fire that doesn't need wood. Poseidon drives his trident into the earth, and rivers rise like snakes uncoiled from sleep. Hades vanishes, and fear spreads before anyone sees his shadow. Hera rallies mortals and nymphs into lines that look less like an army and more like a tide. Demeter makes the very soil rise against Titan feet, vines wrapping like restraints born of patience. Hestia keeps the fires steady, the hearth unbroken, a reminder that homes still wait beyond battle. Zeus lifts the thunderbolt and throws. The sky answers in full. Lightning arcs across Othrys, splitting stone, shaking confidence, exposing the cracks in Cronus' order. Atlas braces, shoulders hunched as if to carry the wound himself, but even his strength cannot patch a mountain unravelling under prophecy. Cronus rises at last. His sickle flashes, the same blade that once cut his father from power. He swings with desperation, carving deep gouges in the air, but each strike feels slower, less certain. Zeus meets him not with hatred, not even with triumph, but with inevitability. Bolt after bolt rains down, not to kill, but to strip away the illusion of invincibility. Cronus staggers, blinded not by light, but by recognition. The curse he tried to swallow has risen alive before him. When he falls, it is not graceful. His knees buckle, his body writhes. His mouth opens to curse and to beg at once. But the words come out broken. The sickle clatters from his hand. The other Titans falter, then scatter. Some retreat into caves. Some throw down weapons, some stare at the sky as if it betrayed them. Only Atlas remains, jaw clenched, fists raised, unwilling to abandon his king. Zeus does not strike him down. Instead, he points to the horizon, to the weight above them all. "If you wish to carry," he says, "carry that." And the heavens lean hard into Atlas's shoulders until he bends, his knees shaking, his breath crushed into grunts. The punishment is not death, but duty without end. Cronus is bound, chains wound with the weight of Tartarus itself. His eyes burn with a defiance already fading into bitterness. The Hecatoncheires drag him down into the pit where his own captives once rotted, their laughter like stone grinding against stone. The other Titans join him, some weeping, some silent, some still cursing Zeus's name. The mouth of Tartarus closes over them with a groan that sounds final. For a moment, Olympus is quiet. The war is done, but victory tastes of iron. The fields are scarred, Rivers rerouted, mountains torn open. The gods look at one another, siblings freed, allies scarred, wounds visible and not, and wonder what kind of world they have just inherited. Hera wipes blood from her cheek and mutters, "Better not waste it." Demeter leans into Rhea's embrace, both women carrying grief older than triumph. Poseidon breathes deep of the salt in the air and already dreams of deeper dominion. Hades removes the helm, his face unreadable, his silence heavier than chains. Zeus stands apart, thunder still crackling faintly in his hand, and feels the prophecy coil around him. He has won. But winning is only a hinge. The door it opens swings into a future he cannot yet see. The sky above is clearer than it has ever been, but clarity does not mean peace. The age of Titans has ended. The age of Olympians begins with a shudder. They gather where the wind can hear them. Not in the hall of victory, not over the pit that swallowed their father, but on a clean shoulder of rock where nothing remembers the last age except the scars on the horizon. Themis stands first, because law comes before comfort. Mnemosyne stands beside her, because remembering is the only way law doesn't turn into superstition. Rhea arrives with the look of someone who has carried an era and set it down without letting it break. The brothers take their places without being told, Zeus with thunder quiet in his hand, Poseidon tasting the salt in the air. Hades present the way a shadow is present unmistakable once you notice it. No speeches, Themis says, choose, and bind the choosing. Zeus nods. He could pronounce himself ruler of everything. No one here could stop him. No one here wants to try. But power that needs to be declared is brittle. He will not begin with brittle. We draw lots, he says, and the decision fits his mouth like a promise he meant to make all along. Rhea exhales. She doesn't bless it out loud. She doesn't have to. Blessing is in the way her shoulders lower. The river Styx climbs the mountain as if it has been invited. Its water isn't beautiful. It's serious. Every oath sworn on it is a chain that doesn't rust, a consequence that doesn't negotiate. Themis pricks each god's finger with a thorn. Blood touches the Styx and goes dark immediately, as if the river is reminding everyone who keeps the books. The Cyclops bring a bowl hammered from ore that remembers lightning. Into it they drop 3 tokens, a feather of sky that fell when the storm leaned too close, a shard of salt that refuses to melt, a small stone blacker than night that smells like iron and sleep. Blind your hands, Themis says. Let chance wear a crown so no one else has to. Zeus reaches first. His fingers find the feather without looking. When he opens his hand, the air rises to meet it. The sky bows an inch. Poseidon reaches next and lifts the salt shard, and somewhere far below, a tide turns early as if eager to show off. Hades doesn't hesitate. He takes the stone and holds it like men hold truth without pleasure, without complaint, with a respect that looks like silence. It is done, Themis says. The Styx answers by refusing to ripple. Poseidon grins, and the grin becomes weather. He walks to the cliff edge, and the ocean recognizes him, the way a horse recognizes a rider it was born expecting. We'll argue, he tells the water, but I'll listen. Far out. A long swell rises and settles, an agreement signed in the grammar of waves. Hades does not move. He studies the stone in his palm the way a craftsman studies a tool he did not ask for and intends to master anyway. The dead will not be trophies, he says. They will be citizens. There will be crossing and coin and consequence. No bribes. No forgetfulness that isn't earned. Mnemosyne tilts her head, approving the last sentence most of all. Themis touches the back of his hand once, brief as a seal. Zeus looks up. He does not shout. He does not claim. He lifts his hand and names the winds in a tone so calm even the unruly ones decide to cooperate. Boreas chills without cruelty. Notus brings rain that waters without washing away. Zephyrus remembers to be kind in spring. Hyperion nods and sets his wheel to a path that will make seasons make sense. The sky's new habit is responsiveness, not appetite. They turn to go, and that's when the problem stands up out of the ground to be counted. Earth, not the idea of earth the work, flooded fields, broken terraces, villages half-standing like sentences missing verbs, graves that want digging, bridges that want rebuilding, crops that need coaxing back into trusting the weather. Who takes this, Themis asks, though she knows the answer already because she can see how all 3 brothers are watching anything else. No one wants to clean it. Poseidon admits, not ashamed. just honest. He was made for horizons that move. Hades doesn't even pretend. He has his hands full with everything everyone else will deny. Rhea steps forward. We share it, she says, or we lose it. Her voice is not a proposal. It's a memory of what happens when power belongs to one body and calls it love. Demeter lifts her chin. I'll grow what's starving, she says, but not if you slap my hands when the fields look messy. Hestia raises her flame until it is exactly the size a home can hold. I'll keep the inside warm, she says. If anyone tries to turn a hearth into a throne room, I will embarrass him. Hera looks at the ruins and makes a list you can't see but can feel. I'll manage the parts that require people to cooperate, she says. Which is all of them. Zeus nods. Earth belongs to the living, he says. Shared. Common ground. I'll keep the sky mild enough to bury the dead and wild enough to remind the proud. He glances at Poseidon. Don't drown what we've just decided to love. Poseidon rolls his eyes like a storm pretending to be domesticated. I'll try, he says, but the moon has opinions. Hades closes his fist around the black stone and doesn't smile. When they come to me, he says, they come named. Names matter. Mnemosyne breathes agreement. Themis looks at the sticks. The river looks back as if to say, I was already planning to. Oaths are spoken, and the mountains record them in their posture. Themis binds the terms to the sticks with a gesture that only looks simple. Break this, she says, and you will not like the price. No one asks what the price is. Smart creatures do not ask questions they are unwilling to pay to hear answered. Hades descends first. The way down does not welcome. It permits. The rock sweats with minerals and old secrets. He walks until the light is a rumour and the sound of water is the only honest thing left. There the river splits into many names. He touches each with the care of a man counting children in the dark Acheron for sorrow, Cocytus for lament, Phlegethon for the anger that still burns after breath is gone, Lethe for the mercy of forgetting when memory would be cruelty, Styx for oath and iron and bookkeeping. He marks thresholds not with doors but with rules. Stay if you must. Cross when you're ready. Pay what crossing costs. He appoints no judges yet, but he makes room for judgment to exist without spectacle. He sets a table with no feast and chairs that do not scrape. The dead arrive and discover that being understood is a kind of warmth. Poseidon walks the shore until shoreline stops being a line and becomes a suggestion. Oceanus meets him there, old and broad and tired of drowning on command. I don't flood because someone tells me to. Oceanus says, I flood because the moon is persuasive and cliffs are arrogant. Poseidon nods. Then don't flood, he says. Unless the land needs reminding, it isn't the only story. They seal the truce by breaking a wave together so it turns to lace and not ruin. In the deeps a palace grows, not from greed but from pressure that has learned how to sing. Horses run under the surface like thoughts no one says out loud. Earthquakes learn to arrive as warnings, not tantrums. Zeus climbs until the air thins and refuses to be anything but honest. Olympus is not a tower. It is a promise of a high place where decisions will be made with long views and short tempers, tamed before they reach the table. He sets no rows of spears at the gate. He sets a bench where worn feet can rest and a bell no one rings unless the news matters. The Cyclopes fix the roof to the sky so storms come when called and leave when told. The hours those small, diligent goddesses of sequence arrive under Themis' guidance and teach morning not to step on afternoon. Rhea walks the valleys with Demeter and Hestia and Hera. They write chairs, they dig where digging is owed, they teach children to count to calm themselves when thunder practices its letters. In places where the ground has learned to expect boots, they plant trees. In places that have forgotten laughter, they rehearse it softly until it remembers its lines. News spreads that the gods drew lots and swore on a river that doesn't forgive. Mortals try the words in their mouths shared earth. The phrase feels new and dangerous and good. It demands more of them than a prayer and gives back more than a favour. At dusk, Zeus stands with his hand on a stone still warm from day. He feels the world settling into the shape they've asked it to hold. He also feels where it refuses. That refusal is not insult, it's warning. He thinks of Cronus and the sickle and how quickly protection becomes possession. He tells the sky to stay restless enough to bother him when he tries to be lazy. Far below, Hades sits at the first crossing and watches a soul hesitate at the river's edge. Take your time, he says, and means it. The soul looks grateful, which is not a word anyone expected to use here. Far out. Poseidon leans into a wind that smells of kelp and iron and possibility. He tells a storm to practice offshore, and it obeys with a grumble that sounds like respect. On the ridge, Themis closes her book. Mnemosyne hums a tune no one else knows yet. Rhea lifts her eyes and does not search the sky for danger. She has work tomorrow that is ordinary and holy. The age turns not with trumpets, but with chores. The sky has a master, the sea has a steward, the underworld has a keeper, the earth has a chance. And for the first time since anyone can remember, that feels like enough. The world doesn't settle as quickly as the gods would like. Even after thrones are claimed and oaths are spoken on the Styx, the scars of the Titan Age linger like cracks that no mortar can hide. Villagers still whisper about Cronus' shadow, and mothers hush children by warning them that if they cry too loud, the sky might close in again. Power has shifted, yes, but fear is slow to believe in transitions. It is in that fragile quiet that the surviving Titans who are not chained in Tartarus begin to shape the edges of the new order. They are not rulers anymore, not soldiers on the front lines, but remnants older siblings of a broken family who refused or escaped full punishment. They carry memories that sting, yet those memories make them valuable in ways even Zeus cannot ignore. Prometheus steps out first. His very name Forethought makes him a thorn in the side of any who prefer silence to planning. He does not approach Olympus like a supplicant, nor Tartarus like a prisoner. Instead, he walks the ridges between mortals, listening to their shallow breaths, watching their shaking hands, cataloguing their endless small struggles. He sees them strike flint against stone with no result, sees them starve while fields groan with untapped promise. He sees fear disguised as obedience, and he decides that gods who call themselves new need reminding of what they owe. He climbs to Olympus uninvited. The hours frown but do not stop him, because there's something in his walk that looks inevitable. Zeus greets him with guarded warmth. "You are not bound," Zeus says. "Why stand here instead of with your brothers in Tartarus? Because I chose not to be a chain." Prometheus replies, "And I choose now not to be a throne. Someone has to remember the ones who don't sit in halls, who don't hold bolts or tridents or helms. Someone has to be the hinge between power and consequence." Zeus studies him, suspicious of words too smooth. "And what do you think consequence demands fire?" Prometheus says simply, "The mortals shiver at night. Their children die of cold while you keep lightning to yourself. If they are to live with dignity, they must burn without begging." The council stirs uneasily. Hera folds her arms, sharp as judgment. "Give them fire and they will burn the fields, burn each other. You would arm infants with knives." Prometheus meets her gaze without flinching. They are already armed with hunger, with fear. Fire doesn't invent destruction. It balances the scales. Zeus shakes his head. They are fragile. That fragility is part of the design. If we hand them fire, what separates us from them? We are gods because we hold what they cannot. Prometheus's voice cuts like a blade through fog. "No, you are gods because you choose. They cannot choose if you deny them tools." Themis, standing silent until now, nods once. "Choice is law's marrow. Without it, order is tyranny." The room tightens. Poseidon growls low in his throat. Hades says nothing, but his eyes weigh the statement as if already imagining mortals crossing into his realm either frozen or burned. Demeter's brow furrows. She knows too well what crops need warmth, what hunger does to human decency. In the end, Zeus refuses. "The sky's flame stays with me," he says. "The world is not ready." Prometheus bows, but the bow is mocking. "Then I will ready it myself." He leaves Olympus with purpose coiled tight in his shoulders. Days later, lightning cracks across the horizon in a storm too far from Olympus to be claimed. Prometheus waits, then cups the living spark in his hands. The fire hisses, eager and untamed, but he carries it with the tenderness of a parent lifting an infant. He hides it in a fennel stalk ordinary, unimpressive, and walks it down into mortal valleys. When the first hearth flickers, mortals fall to their knees in shock. Prometheus kneels with them, guiding their trembling hands, teaching them how to feed flame without smothering it, how to bank it so it sleeps but does not die. The warmth spreads through villages like the lifting of a curse. For the first time, night is not entirely the enemy, but Olympus notices Zeus's wrath is not swift, it is methodical. He summons Prometheus again, this time not with courtesy, but with chains waiting in the wings. "You stole from me," Zeus says, his tone colder than thunder. "You took what was mine." Prometheus meets his fury with calm. "It was never yours. Fire belongs to all who can carry it. You did not invent its hunger, yet you will feel mine." Zeus snarls. He orders Prometheus seized. The chains are forged of adamant, unyielding, cruel. Prometheus does not resist. He is dragged to a crag in the Caucasus where the sky is sharp enough to cut the lungs. There he is bound, arms stretched wide against the rock, exposed to every storm, every burning sun, every slicing wind. As punishment, Zeus sends an eagle vast, relentless to tear at Prometheus's liver each day. By night, the organ grows back, and by dawn the bird returns, hungry again. Suffering becomes ritual. Mortals hear of it and weep. Some whisper gratitude in their prayers, thanking the Titan whose agony brought their warmth. Others tremble at the cruelty of gods who punish generosity. The story seeps into the soil, salvation is never free, and gifts worth keeping come drenched in blood. Mnemosyne remembers. She walks among humans and murmurs the name Prometheus into their ears so they cannot forget. Themis keeps her distance, but law shifts slightly, bending under the weight of what it means to choose disobedience for the sake of others. Even Rhea, who has seen too many children devoured by fear, weeps when she hears the eagle's scream echo across the peaks. Yet even in chains, Prometheus endures. He speaks through the pain, telling mortals who wander near how to measure stars, how to till stubborn soil, how to watch the smoke of fire to know tomorrow's wind. His suffering becomes a school, his agony a curriculum. He is less a prisoner than a professor, chained but unbroken. Meanwhile, other titans who escaped Tartarus shape the edges of this new era in quieter ways. Themis takes her place beside Zeus not as servant but as conscience. Her laws are stern, but they bend toward justice rather than fear. She counsels restraint when victory makes the young gods reckless, insists on oaths before actions, reminds them that rule without law is only hunger dressed in finery. Mnemosyne, mother of the muses, births inspiration into the world. Poets, singers, dreamers begin to hum verses that soften grief and sharpen memory. Mortals start to write their own past in song, no longer just reacting to godly thunder but weaving meaning from their own scars. The muses teach that survival is more than eating and sleeping, it is remembering and creating. Zeus tolerates them, Hera scorns them, but mortals cling to them like lanterns. Even Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, stumbles into significance. His name means afterthought, and he embodies the tragic impulse to act before wisdom arrives. The gods laugh at his foolishness, but mortals find something familiar in him. Where Prometheus is foresight, Epimetheus is regret, and regret is deeply human. He marries Pandora, a woman sculpted with divine hands but cursed with divine suspicion. Through her, Epimetheus learns the cost of trust misplaced. Through him, humanity learns that mistakes, though costly, are inevitable steps in growth. Themis, Mnemosyne, Prometheus, Epimetheus. These surviving titans remind Olympus that the line between divine and mortal is not walls but bridges. They are not kings anymore. They are legacies embodied. Still, unease coils beneath the surface. Hera warns that Prometheus's defiance is a crack in Olympus's foundation. Poseidon grows restless, wielding waves as threats when ignored. Hades retreats deeper into his shadowed realm, shaping the dead into citizens but also into mirrors that reflect the living too clearly. And Zeus, though triumphant, feels the prophecy like a pebble in his shoe if his father fell. So might he, Atlas, chained under the sky, groans with eternal weight. His punishment is not just a burden, but a reminder the sky itself resists being owned. Mortals look up and wonder if every throne, no matter how high, eventually bends. The age of Titans has ended, but their echoes refuse silence. In Prometheus's fire, in Mnemosyne's memory, in Themis's lore, in Epimetheus's blunders, pieces of the old order seep into the new. They are warnings disguised as gifts, gifts disguised as warnings. The Olympians may rule, but they do not rule alone, and far below, in Tartarus, Cronus stirs in his chains. His whispers leak through cracks like smoke, promising that cycles never die, they repeat. The gods may pretend they've built something new, but the blood on their hands tells another story. The Titans may have fallen, but their legacy still seeds the ground. Every gift, every curse, every law, every memory, they're all Titans wearing new names. The sky grows quiet, but not restful. Change has come, but permanence has not. And in that tension between what was and what must be the story of gods and men finds its rhythm. The punishment of Prometheus bleeds into the air like a warning no one can ignore. Each sunrise carries the scream of the eagle. Each sunset closes with the sound of torn flesh knitting itself together again. Mortals, who once lived hidden in the cold, now build fires with trembling pride. They huddle around warmth that feels stolen and sacred, whispering his name as though each syllable is a coal that glows in the throat. Zeus pretends not to hear it, but he hears everything. The prayers that slip upward do not call his name. First, they call Prometheus. The king of gods can endure defiance, but he cannot endure forgetfulness. A ruler without memory is already halfway dethroned. He tells himself he is justice. He tells himself order must be maintained. But beneath the thunder, he tastes the bitterness of envy. The other gods splinter in their reactions. Hera scoffs, calling Prometheus reckless, a saboteur who cannot distinguish between generosity and rebellion. Poseidon shrugs, amused by the mortal struggle. Unconcerned as long as his waves remain obeyed, Hades stays silent, watching how mortals use fire not only to cook food but to light funerals, smoke curling like prayers for the forgotten. Demeter smiles faintly. She sees harvests multiply under fire's hand, bread rising where before only famine grew. Hestia guards the hearths that spring up across villages, her flame constant, quiet, loyal. She knows every flicker bears Prometheus's face, but the gods are not alone in shaping destiny. In the shadow of this disobedience, a new creation begins a trick wrapped as a gift, conceived in Zeus's resentment and moulded by divine hands into flesh. He commands Hephaestus, the smith, to sculpt a woman from clay. The hammer rings, the fire roars, and the shape of Pandora rises, perfect in form, terrifying in implication. Each god adds something. Aphrodite blesses her with beauty, Athena with curiosity, Hermes with cunning tongue, Hera with charm that tastes like venom, and Zeus himself with a sealed jar, a vessel no one is meant to open. He gives her as a bride to Epimetheus, Prometheus's foolish brother. Prometheus warned Epimetheus long ago, do not accept gifts from Zeus. They are cages dressed as treasures. But Epimetheus, true to his nature, does not think forward, he thinks after. He looks at Pandora and forgets every caution. Desire blinds foresight. Love makes fools of warnings. He marries her, and in that union the trap breathes. At first, Pandora seems only a wonder. She walks among mortals, and they follow her as though warmth itself has learned to wear a face. She asks questions no one dares answer fully. Why does thunder strike? Why do gods rule? Why must people die? Her curiosity feels like innocence, but beneath it hums a restlessness that no gift can soothe. She stares at the jar Zeus placed in her keeping. Day by day, the weight of secrecy gnaws at her. A jar is not meant to stay sealed in a world that aches to know. One night, when the wind howls against the hut and Epimetheus sleeps beside her, Pandora's hands tremble. She tells herself she will only look, only peek, only understand. She breaks the seal. What rushes out is not light, not treasure, but plague, pestilence, famine, envy, greed, deceit, despair. They roar upward like insects given wings. The world darkens not from night but from curse. Fields rot, children cry, neighbors glare with sudden suspicion. Pandora screams, slamming the lid shut with all her strength, but it is too late. All but one spirit has flown free. At the bottom of the jar, faint and stubborn, lies hope. She shivers in the dimness, fragile as a single flame on a stormy night. Pandora, weeping, keeps her there, afraid to lose even this last glimmer. She guards hope as if it were the final coin in a bankrupt house. terrified that if she spends it, nothing will remain. Mortals awaken to their new condition. They know hunger that lingers, illness that does not heal, betrayal that comes from friends, sorrow that eats the bones. They fall to their knees, cursing gods and titans alike. Yet in the deepest moments, when despair claws hardest, hope flares faintly, a mother whispers to a starving child that spring will come. A widow lights a fire and believes her husband watches from beyond. A farmer plants seeds in soil he knows is thin, because not planting would feel like death before death. Zeus watches with grim satisfaction. Suffering is a leash, and mortals bound by it will look upward again, begging. Yet the leash frays, for every prayer sent to Olympus in fear. Another rises to Prometheus in gratitude, and another whispered in secret to Hope. Fragile but undefeated, Prometheus, bound and torn daily, learns of Pandora's jar from the voices of mortals who climb his mountain, bringing offerings of bread baked in new fire. They unleashed every misery. They tell him, but one thing stayed Elpis, Hope. His face, lined with endless pain, softens, then guard her. He urges, guard her as if she were fire itself. She is the ember you must never let go cold. The punishment continues. The eagle descends, its wings blotting out the sun, its beak tearing with unholy rhythm. Prometheus screams, but he also sings. He teaches mortals who gather below his rock how to shape stone into tools, how to mark stars for navigation, how to read smoke for weather. Knowledge bleeds out of his wounds as surely as blood. The gods may bind his body, but they cannot chain his defiance. Meanwhile, Zeus begins to sense the double edge of his vengeance. Pandora's jar cursed humanity, but it also birthed resilience. Mortals begin to weave stories around Hope, turning her into a goddess in their minds, a companion at every funeral, a whisper at every birth. Where despair strikes hardest, hope plants roots deepest. Zeus realizes too late that in trying to chain humanity through suffering, he may have armed them with something he cannot strike down. The other gods argue, Hera insists mortals are growing insolent, bold enough to imagine equality. Poseidon scoffs, pointing out that storms drown rich and poor alike. Equality is the sea's oldest law. Demeter urges gentleness, pleading that mortals who farm with fire and hope will grow food enough to feed the temples. Hestia says little, but her steady flame, tended in every mortal hut, proves that the gods are already being worshipped in new, humbler ways. Hades observes from his realm, watching the dead arrive with heavier burdens yet brighter eyes. They carry pain, but they carry meaning with it, he remarks. Hope walks them to my gates, and even when they cross, some look back smiling. His tone unsettles Zeus more than defiance would. Themis records judgments, Mnemosyne writes down memories, and the muses sing songs of both suffering and endurance. The world begins to hum with stories, each one a thread binding mortals not just to gods but to each other. Prometheus remains chained until Heracles, generations later, will one day break his bonds. But long before that, his rebellion seeps into mortal bone. The jar that cursed them also gifted them perspective. Life is fragile, cruel, unpredictable, and yet it is livable. Because hope refuses to be silenced. Pandora, too, suffers. She sees her face reviled in stories, her name tied to disaster. She retreats, ashamed. Yet wherever she walks, mortals follow. They blame her, yes, but they also crave her presence. She embodies the truth they cannot escape. Curiosity is both curse and blessing, and the hunger to know is inseparable from being alive. She spends her days wandering villages, teaching children small comforts, planting seeds where the soil is poorest, carrying her jar like a wound that cannot close. Her marriage with Epimetheus is strained, marked by arguments, regret, and longing. He still loves her, though he curses his own foolishness. She still loves him, though she resents the trap they both live inside. Their union is not happy, but it is honest a mirror for the mortal condition itself. The Olympians rule from above, but the story of Pandora and Prometheus changes the fabric of the world below. Mortals no longer see themselves as pawns alone. They see themselves as bearers of endurance, torchbearers of fire, guardians of hope. They begin to tell each other that even if the gods themselves vanish, these two gifts will remain. And so, paradoxically, Zeus's vengeance creates the very thing he feared mortals with independence in their hearts, loyalty that cannot be commanded, resilience that no chain can suppress. The Titans may have fallen, but through Prometheus's agony and Pandora's mistake, their legacy twines into every human life. From that point forward, mankind does not merely endure the whims of gods, they carry their own weapon, the refusal to stop believing in tomorrow. Hope becomes the quiet rebellion of mortals, the answer to every curse. And though Zeus sits on Olympus, thunderbolt in hand, even he cannot silence the ember that flickers in every chest. The world carried its curses like new bones, awkward, sharp, sometimes painful, but part of the body all the same. Mortals learn to walk with them, to stumble and bleed and still move forward. Disease stalked villages, hunger bit at families, envy soured friendships, and despair waited like a shadow in every doorway. And yet, against this weight, fire glowed in huts, bread rose in clay ovens, children laughed in fields even when the soil cracked with drought. The gods had unleashed misery, but misery could not stand alone. Hope persisted, fragile but relentless, as if every sorrow dragged its own antidote behind it. Zeus watched this unfold from Olympus, his thunderbolt resting across his knees like a reminder that he could strike if he wished. He had punished Prometheus, unleashed Pandora, and yet mortals did not break. They suffered, yes, but in their suffering they found new shapes of strength. Their prayers no longer sounded like grovelling, they sounded like bargaining. They praised when it suited them, cursed when it didn't, whispered gratitude to fire more than to the sky. It unsettled him. Power was supposed to inspire fear and obedience, not negotiation. Hera saw it too, and her suspicion sharpened into warning. They are learning, she told Zeus, not learning like children you can scold, but learning like rivals who will one day look you in the eye. You gave them pain and they turned it into story. You gave them weakness and they call it love. You gave them hope and now they believe they can endure anything, even you. Zeus tightened his grip on the bolt. Then perhaps they should be reminded. But Themis raised her hand. Reminders are not laws. If you strike too often, you prove their point that you fear them. Rule by fear is rule by cracks. Rule by justice is the only rule that holds, Mnemosyne added quietly, and they will remember every strike. Memories do not die as easily as bodies. The council fractured into its familiar rhythms, Poseidon demanding freedom to unleash storms when mortals displeased him, Demeter pleading for mercy on farmers who barely survived the seasons, Hades observing without expression, Hera pressing for control, Athena offering strategies, Hermes weaving trickery into possibility. Each god spoke with conviction, but beneath the debate hummed the same truth: the world had changed. The Titanomachy had ended. Cronus was buried in Tartarus, but victory was not stability. It was only the beginning of a new contest this time, not between gods and titans, but between gods and mortals themselves. Mortals multiplied. Villages grew into towns, towns into cities. They built walls not only against beasts but against despair, painting murals of fire and plough, of mothers carrying children, of rivers feeding fields. They sang songs that praised not Zeus's thunder, but Prometheus's sacrifice. Not Hera's sharpness, but Hestia's warmth. In their mouths, the gods became complicated figures, sometimes protectors, sometimes tyrants, sometimes jokes told at midnight when fear loosened tongues. Stories spread faster than prayers, and stories, once born, could not be silenced. Zeus felt the weight of it pressing against Olympus. He struck storms across the Aegean, split trees with lightning, reminded the world who sat on the throne. Mortals trembled, yes, but they also cursed. They rebuilt what he destroyed, and every time they did, they whispered hope's name. Meanwhile, the other gods carved their dominions. Poseidon churned the seas, building palaces beneath waves of coral and pearl. Sailors begged his favor, and he granted it when it amused him. Hades deepened his realm, shaping rivers of the dead into orderly streams, building gates guarded by Cerberus, ensuring the underworld was feared but also respected. Hera governed marriage, but her jealousy burned hot, and mortals began to fear her more than honor her. Demeter walked the fields, teaching mortals the cycles of sowing and reaping, yet wept every winter when crops died, mourning like a mother for all that passed away. Among them, one goddess grew quietly, often ignored but never forgotten Hestia. She had no temples of grandeur, no bloody sacrifices, no armies or thunder. She had hearths, simple fires burning in every home, every gathering, every small circle of warmth. Mortals prayed to her not with fear but with trust, whispering thanks before meals, asking for safety in the night, and in those quiet moments, her power spread like roots underground, unseen yet unshakable. She became the heartbeat of humanity, the flame no storm could fully extinguish. Prometheus, chained to the rock, heard whispers of these changes. Mortals brought offerings of bread, fruit, and whispered stories. They risked Zeus's wrath just to stand beneath his torment and promised that his suffering was not wasted. He listened, bleeding, and told them truths in return: how to read the constellations, how to track seasons, how to listen to the earth. His body was prison, but his voice was freedom. His agony was endless, but so was his defiance. And yet, Prometheus was not the only echo of the Titan Age. Atlas groaned beneath the sky, his shoulders bent but unbroken. He muttered curses that became winds, gritted teeth that rattled stars. His punishment was eternal, but even punishment becomes identity when carried long enough. Mortals began to tell stories of Atlas not as a villain but as endurance itself, the one who bore what no one else could. Even in defeat, the Titans refused to vanish. They haunted the edges of the new order, shadows that refused to dissolve. In this fragile balance, something new began to stir ambition among the younger gods. Athena, born from Zeus's head in a blaze of wisdom and war, watched humanity with fascination. She saw their resilience, their creativity, their stubborn refusal to bow completely. She admired them, even as she guided them. Hermes, trickster and messenger, delighted in their mischief, stealing and lying and laughing in ways that mirrored his own nature. Aphrodite, born from sea foam and violence, saw in mortals a reflection of her beauty and cruelty. Love and jealousy twined together. The Olympians, though powerful, began to resemble the mortals they ruled more than the Titans they overthrew. And so the cycle deepened, gods shaping mortals, mortals shaping gods. Stories flowed both ways, binding them together in a knot neither could fully untangle. But not all was peace. From Tartarus, Cronus stirred in his chains, his whispers seeped through cracks in the earth, carried by dreams and madness. He spoke to those who longed for the old order, who feared the chaos of too much choice, who believed obedience was safer than freedom. The sky was once mine, his voice rasped, and it will be again. The child who betrayed me will taste the same fate. Some mortals shivered in their sleep, some priests claimed visions, and even some gods turned their heads when the air grew heavy with memory. Zeus felt it too. He walked Olympus at night, the thunderbolt warm in his palm, and wondered if prophecy was a river that never stopped flowing. He had defeated his father, yes, but would his own children rise against him one day? Would the curse that travelled from Uranus to Cronus now pass into his own veins? He ruled the sky. But paranoia gnawed at his throne. He grew restless, jealous, unfaithful, grasping at power with hands that could never quite hold enough. Hera saw his betrayals and burned with rage. Their marriage, meant to symbolize divine unity, became a theatre of suspicion and vengeance. She punished his lovers, cursed their children, waged wars of spite that spilled down into mortal lives. Zeus thundered louder, striking with bolts when words failed. Olympus became less a family than a battlefield, siblings at odds, allies turning into rivals. Mortals looked up and saw not harmony, but drama gods who bickered like themselves, who sinned like themselves, who failed like themselves. In their flaws, mortals found both comfort and terror, and yet, beneath all this noise, hope persisted. Hope in the hearths tended by Hestia, hope in the seeds planted by Demeter, hope in the stories sung by Mnemosyne's daughters, the Muses, who whispered inspiration into poets and dreamers, hope in the fire Prometheus had gifted, still glowing in every village, hope in Pandora's jar, still trembling but never gone. One winter, harsher than any in memory, famine swept across the land. Fields froze, rivers turned to glass, animals died in their tracks. Mortals huddled in caves, whispering that the gods had abandoned them. Zeus considered it a punishment, a test of loyalty, Hera sneered, saying mortals deserved no better. But Demeter wept, walking the frozen soil, her tears falling and hardening into crystals. She begged her siblings to show mercy. None listened until Hestia, quiet and steady, spread her flame into every mortal hearth. Families who had nothing left found warmth anyway. They prayed not to Zeus, not to Hera, not even to Demeter. They prayed to the quiet flame. And when spring finally came, it was not thunder they thanked, but fire. Zeus bristled. His paranoia deepened. He grew harsher, more controlling, more desperate to remind the world who ruled. But the more he struck, the more mortals clung to hope. The more he thundered, the more they whispered Prometheus's name. The more he punished, the more they remembered his father's fall. Power, Zeus discovered, is loud when it's weakest. Prometheus endured, bound and bleeding, but his defiance spread like wildfire. Pandora wandered with her jar, carrying the weight of curses but also the spark of hope. Mortals stumbled, suffered, rose again. The Olympians quarrelled, loved, betrayed, and ruled in fits and starts. And the Titans, though chained, refused silence. The story of the world was no longer about one age replacing another. It was about cycles order rising, falling, reshaping itself, never final, never finished. Chaos birthed Titans. Titans birthed gods. Gods birthed mortals. Mortals birthed stories. And stories circled back to shape the gods again. The wheel turned endlessly. Each spoke a generation. Each revolution a reminder nothing holds forever. Not even Olympus. And through it all, one truth glowed steady. Not thunder, not fear, not chains or curses, but hope. Hope that endured every misery, survived every storm, outlived every fall. Hope that whispered into mortal ears that tomorrow was worth reaching, even if today was cruel. Hope that sat at the bottom of the jar, waiting, refusing to die. That, in the end, was the legacy of the Titans. Not their power, not their downfall, not even their chains, but the endurance they forced into the bones of humanity. Fire in the cold, memory in the dark, law against chaos, hope against despair. The Titans had lost their thrones, but they had given the world something no god could take back: the knowledge that survival was possible. And so the story closes not with a triumphal hymn, not with thunder or fire or prophecy fulfilled, but with a quieter truth. In every village, a hearth burns. In every field, a seed grows. In every grave, a name is whispered. And in every heart, hope waits, patient and stubborn, the ember that outlasts even gods.